In this video, we're looking at core walls. What I've got in front of me is a part model of a Ifc Import. It's very localized around the core, and I've only taken 3 lifts. So what we've got here is a lift lobby representing 3 lift door openings, which gets carried up above. And if we look from below, we can see that lift core opening here is pretty big, so I assume on the back part of it there'll be a staircase well, which is what these doors are for. Now I've decided in this video we will detail this wall because it's well represented. It's got 2 lift openings, a smaller one and a bigger one, or not lift openings, just door openings. And it gives us room to add door headers over this door close to the corner, and also a door header over this door with some penetrations representing some services that will run in the ceiling cavity. I think that will give us a good indication. Now, when I imported this model, these came in as 2, or they were from the original software. They were modeled as 2 separate walls, but they sort of lap in the middle of this wall. So it's very unlikely that the contractor will build it like that. They will most probably build this whole wall as a full length wall. It's not very long. That's 5 meters, and that's another 9 meters. So they'll probably pour this as one pour. So with that assumption, if you click on both of those two and select them, I have made them as a pour 2 on their own. If I click on this one, for instance, that's a pour 1. So for us to detail that as one pour, I will use the pour view mode. So if I now click on that, because they were marked more labeled as a pour 2, they will then, you can then select them as monolithic, and they are separate to this one, which is a pour 1. Now you can also show some pour numbering in color coded. It's just a filter we have in the standard Australasian environment, which will just show you in a color form what the different pours are. If I just flick back to the standard there for a minute. Okay, so with that in mind, having this as 1, let's try and isolate that, and I think that is core wall 4. Yep, it is. If we look at this wall, what I'm going to do is I'll start with the headers, reinforcing the headers. Then I'll do the horizontal reinforcement for the wall, and then the vertical reinforcement for the wall, and then we can sort of replicate it to the top. And I think that would be sufficient for this video. I have some reinforcement noted next to me. It's not a actual replication of an actual design. It's just based on some experience. I'm just going to use realistic bar sizes, and over this door the engineer is calling for ligatures of N16 at 300 millimeter spacings, and then he's got 24 millimeter bars, 2 of them in the bottom with another layer on top of that, and 2 in the top with another layer below that. And on this header, he's got N16 ligatures specified at 150 millimeter spacing. And then he's got 32s, 4 of them in the bottom in groups of 2, and 4 in the top in groups of 2. So there's a bit of bunching going on that we'll need to figure out. And also because of the close spacing of the ligatures, the 16s here, we'll probably have to move them between these openings so they don't clash. So let's start with this one first. So what I'll do is, in this case, I will go over to Rebar, and I'll select my crossing rebar as a rebar set. I will make sure that I just call up my standard default, so I can just reset my property pane just to make sure that everything is flushed to where I want it. Then I'll go to my rebar catalog, and I will select N16 as a ligature stirrup. Okay. And then for the class, I'm just going to use a light color for the ligatures. And for now, I'm just going to use a 300 spacing as specified, and I'll leave the rest as is for now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on the on this edge here, so we can get the form of the rebar there. And then I'm going to enable the guideline location, so I can actually just pull this back a bit. Now what I like to do is just pull it back that mark, so that no faces get created beyond that header, and then I will rectify that. Now it's a much easier way to sort of detail. If I just sort of short there, so the yellow represents the leg faces from the rebar. If I now say OK, you can see the rebar is created in that zone, and if I click on it and I go over to my visibility and I enable my leg faces, you can see where the faces are created. Now the first thing we can do, if I go to Control P to go from the top, and also I'm in a rendered mode, so at this point it's probably best to go to the view list and to go to the next level. And in this level also we will enable the pour mode. And the other thing that we will do is we will go to display and make sure that we switch off the part labeling. And then also what we want to do is enable the CW4, so we only see what we want to see. And on this, I think what we need to do is on top we want to see nothing more than 0, so actually -10, so we don't see the wall on top. And we do want to see at the wall at bottom, say we go down 3 meters, so we can see it all the way to the bottom. If I say modify, apply, okay, that's exactly what we can see. We'll make it transparent. We go Control P so we can see it from the top. And if we look at that, we can then see the dotted line represents our opening, and that is where our ligatures sit. So we can see where the faces came up to. So the one thing that we can do now is if I hold in my, make sure my faces are on. And if you don't know where that is, under rebar, visibility, leg faces. What you can do is holding your alternate key, select all of those faces, all of those nodes in that plane, and say move linear, and we can then move that just to the door opening, and make sure your y-axis is the only one that's got a value in it. Modify, and that sorts out that one. And if we click the bottom one again, we go alternate, select all of those grips, move linear, and I've got a shortcut key that I use, ML, to say move linear. Now it's the same as saying um, if I just escape out of that, if you alternate, grab all of these and you say right click, move special linear, it's the same as that. I've just got a shortcut key that I've defined as ML for move linear. Okay, so with that in mind, if we look at this now and we go to the data, we can see we've got 5 bars and they spaced at 300 and there's no offset. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a 75mm offset either side, and I am going to go to exact distributions and I'm going to say 4 at 300. And if I do that, I then end up with 4 bars spaced at 300 with a 75 offset on either side. So that works pretty well. The next thing I want to do before I put in the ears, or we might as well put in the ears right now. If I go switch off the leg faces, if I click on the rebar again, I can go to End Modifier, make sure I just load my defaults, and then for the hook type, I am going to select 135 degrees. And then if I select on the edge of the reinforcement there, we can see that it adds a ear to both ends of the bar. And then what I can do is I can just pull this modifier so it only spans over the doorway. So I can just pull that arrow back as well, just to that point. And that pretty much takes care of the ligatures there. Okay, so while we're here, we might as well do these as well. So if I go to crossing bars again, and this time I might just, actually, let's do this one a little bit different. So for this one, we'll go more point input, make sure it's linear. We've still got our 16s, our same color. We can zero these out, so Tekla auto calculates that, and we'll go by target spacing, and the target spacing is 150. That's just to sort of have an initial value of how many bars. And then what I'll do is I'll start over here, go perpendicular across, and then down, perpendicular, across, perpendicular, and then back, perpendicular. And then what I need to do is middle mouse to accept that shape, and then Tekla asks the start position of the range. So if we go from here to here, we will get the same result as with the crossing bars, except that we don't now have to move the grips around. If we go visibility, leg faces, we've now sort of forced it by defining the input. Okay, the next thing we want to do is just add our end detail. And again, we can just click over that zone, and that adds ears for us. So that pretty much takes care of that. Now, at the moment, they are encroaching in the openings, but I'm not going to worry about that until we at the point where we've got most of the other reinforcement in, because this is still going to move around a little bit. And what I mean by that is, currently, if you look at this and you switch on your visibility, you look at the layer number of this layer, for instance, it's in layer 1, which means it's the most outside one, but it's eventually going to end up in layer 2 because of the horizontal bars passing on the side of it. The next thing we're going to do is just add the main reinforcement down the bottom here. So the way I'm going to do that again is I'm going to use the More tool, and I'm going to go 2-point input. Linear is good. And then for the reinforcement, this time the engineer is asking for a 24 main bar. And then for the distribution, he wants the number of bars, and he wants 2 bars to be put in the bottom in 2 groups. So we'll put in the 2 bars. So the first thing is we've got to define the shape. So the shape is just a long bar, sort of that length, and middle mouse, and then the start and the end position of the span. So if we say it's spanning from this end of the door or from the wall to the other end, uh, we will then get the appropriate bars. Now I just want to change the color of those bars to, say, for instance, dark blue, or the class rather, so just to distinguish it from the ligatures. Now the big thing here is that if we click on this bar, we've still got our leg faces enabled. We need to pull this out to the end of this wall. So what we can do is, if we click on this edge and then go down to this contextual toolbar that pops up, and at the moment it's set to move in 3D. If we click on that and say move in a perpendicular direction, we can then grab this and move it out to to any end, and it will keep its plane without going out of plane, and that sort of extends it to the end there. The other thing that we want to do is, um, we want this end to project 1 meter into the wall. Now, the best way to secure that is to say I want an end detail on this wall, and I'll load my defaults again just to reset any settings I made. And then the type of hook I want is a no hook. And then what I want to do is, I want, under the length adjustment, I want to adjust the type to a end offset, and I want the offset to extend 1 meter. So now that I've got that, if I now hover over that end of those bars, it will extend those bars 1 meter into the wall, which is exactly what the engineer is asking for. Now on this end, he wants a cog. He wants the bars to curve up. Now, as soon as you put a cog onto the end, and I'll just do this to show the issue here. If we go in and we cog 90 degrees, if we put a cog on this, it will actually give you a cog, but if you click on the bar, there's no face. So what happens at the end of the day, if you want to manipulate these bars and push them in, because there's other bars coming in, you can't really manipulate it by using the face layering or an additional offset. It is where it is. So in that regard, my preference is to delete that end, and then click on the bar, click on this end, and then make sure that you set your setting back to move in a 3D mode. And then if you're holding your control key, you click on that line, you drag it up. We can create a 300 hook, which will be more than sufficient for this bar. And now, as you can see there, we have a face and we've got a layer number 1. So we now have control. If I click on that face, I can move it to any layer I want. I can even add additional offset just to manipulate, and just to ensure that if we copy another bar above, to ensure that we maintain our leg length, we can add another end modifier and load my defaults. And for the type, I'm going to say no hook. And for the adjustment type, I'm going to say I want to force a leg length, and that leg length must always be 300. If I do that and hover over this leg length, then we now have a leg of 300. So if I click on that bar, right click, and I go inquire, we see we have now forced the 300 leg length there, and no matter what happens and where that bar moves, that leg length will be maintained. So we need to do the same on the top. So what we can do with these bars is we can go um, Control C to copy it, and I'll copy it from there to there, to that point. And now what we can do, if we click on this, and we click on this face here, we can just flip it so it's actually inside, and we can also make sure that this is in the inside. By clicking this little button here, we can move to the innermost. That will move that in here. And for this one, what we can do is we can just move this layer down in the opposite direction, and I'll do the same 300 there. And again, because of our end modifier, it will force the 300. Now we've got a 300 leg hook on this side. We've got the 1000 extension, but what the engineer also wants, he wants a double grouping. So if we click both those bars, say Control C, and we pick an origin point here, you can see there's the bars. And if we click the same point, Tekla is going to say you're about to copy the objects in the same position. I said yes, okay, and I want to keep the duplicate. So now what we have in theory, and I'll just quit out of the command, we've got two sets there and two sets there. Now if we click on the one set and we just pick one of the faces, and we can now move the 2 into a 3, and you can see how the bar pops in there. And now if we pick on this face, we can move the 1 into a 2. And this is now what I mean about more control when we create. Now those bars, if we look at the bending schedule, will be exactly the same bar in the bending schedule. So in other words, the number of will just be increased. So we're not generating additional bars as such. We're just creating more numbers. And we'll do exactly the same with this one. We'll pick the top one and we'll move that into a layer 3 to move the one set down. And we'll click on this face and move that into 2. And just like that, we now have a header with two groups of bars down the bottom there and two groups of bar on the top. Uh, and it wraps around there, and obviously this will change as we do the other walls reinforcement, but it's just a matter of click on the face and change the layer. And now we can go over to this side and do the same here. So for this one, we can go to the more point input again, and this time the engineer is calling for a 32 bar as a main. We'll keep the same color, same number, and we can say this bar goes from this end to this end, middle mouse, and it spans from this end to this end. And just like that, we've got those two bars in there. And now what we can do with these is we can just say add an end modifier, and we still have our previous setting of no hook, but instead of having a leg length, we're going to say we want the offset again, and the offset's got to be 1000 millimeters. And then what we can do is just hover over this end and the bar gets extended, hover over that end, the bar gets extended. And that's pretty much it for that header. So all we need to do now is we've got to take that header and say Control C and copy it from the bottom to the top. And then once we're there, you can see the bar is now in the wrong plane. It's sort of sitting on top of the wall, not knowing where it is. But as soon as I click on the face and I flip the face, it goes inside, so it knows where the cover is. And all I have to do now is to click this little button here. It says move to the most inner, and it will put it inside the legs for us, so we don't have to know what the cover or anything is. The rebars are smart enough to know how they relate in with the other rebar sets. So now that we've got that, we can click this set again and that set. We can say Control C, click our origin point, click a destination point in the same part. Tekla says you're about to copy over the other part, yes, and keep the duplicate. And now, just like before, we can now click on any set, click on the actual leg face, just make sure it's switched on here under visibility, and then we can change 2 to 3, and it will add it on top of that one. And we can do the same here, click on the face and move 2 to 3. And just like that, we've got two sets of rebars groups on top of each other, nicely inside of our ligatures, extending into the wall, and that takes care of the two headers. Now, in terms of the position of the ligatures, we will address that a little bit later once we've done the wall reinforcement. And having said that, I think it's a good time now to start with the wall reinforcement. So what I'm going to do is I'll detail the horizontal reinforcement first. So if we go to a crossing bar, I'll just load my standards to wipe out any settings I've made. And then for the rebar, I'm going to select a normal main reinforcement. I am going to pick the yellow bar or yellow class 6 for the horizontals. And then for the spacing, the engineer is scoring for 300 millimeter spacing. And then I think that's it for now. We will deal with the creation method in a second. So if I just click over this, and say, okay, now although you're only seeing that, if I click this, you can see because of the ranges from top to the bottom, it's also going to include bars everywhere where you see yellow. So if I say OK, you can see we've got bars across the whole panel, although we've got some broken ends here, which we will fix up first. So there it looks like the bars are fine. Yeah, it's going over that side, and you can see how it's put it on the inside of that. We're going to fix that up now. First, we want to do is we want to click on this bar, and in here we need another face. So what we can do is, while that bar is selected over on the ribbon, we can see they add a face. If we click on that and hover over this side, we can add a face, and that sort of fixes up that part. If we scroll to it, we still need to do it here. If I click on the bars again, add a leg face, we can add a leg face on the inside there, rotate around, add a leg face on the inside, yeah, that sorts that out. And then lastly, we can add a leg face over this side. Okay, so that pretty much sorts out what the bars look like. Now, these bars just directly over the door looks a bit broken, but don't worry about that. It's got to do with spacing. We're going to sort that out now. And the way I'm going to sort that out is I'm going to say, give me a section by 2 points. Now, I've got a shortcut C2, but if you want to know how to do it, it's under your new views and then using 2 points. And then you can just click from one side to the other side and it will give you a view on the line you've created. I'll make it transparent. Now, what I'm going to do here is I am going to force my spacing, and for this I'm just going to switch off my under rebar, visibility, leg faces. I'll switch them off so it doesn't clutter our view too much. If I click on the bar, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my start. Now if you see under distribution start and end offset, and if you look at this little arrow, you can see the arrow is pointing down, so the start's on the top. I want to switch the direction around. I want the start at the bottom, so there's a little button down the bottom here that says swap ends. And if you click that, you can see how the arrow tilts around. And then for my start, I want to put in 50 millimeters. And for the end, I'm just going to type in 0 because it doesn't really matter what it's on top. And if I say OK, it positions the bars. And then what I'm going to do is, if you look at the exact spacing, it gives you 10 bars at 285. I don't like that, especially when it comes to creating your drawings. It's a bit messy. So what I do is I just go for exact spacings and I say 10 at 300. And as soon as I do that, you can immediately see that we have better configuration of reinforcement. No silly looking bars with broken ends. They're all pretty much well formed, even the ones just here below. If you are concerned about that one being too low, it's as simple as click on the bar again and just increase the 50 to 75. That will push it up a bit and actually looks much better now. We'll keep it at 50. Okay, now that those bars are formed and they look pretty good, we just need to, before we start breaking them up, we need to look at the layering here. Now you can see those bars at the moment are going inside of these leagues, and the reason for that is these we inserted before those. Now if I click on this, hover over to our contextual toolbar, and I hover over to the first one that says move to the outermost layer, as soon as I do that, it swaps them around. You can now see the ligatures and the internals have moved inwards, and the horizontal bars of the walls are now the outer layer. And I need to do the same here. Well, it's actually already done it because it's still part of the same group. So everything is just like that as fallen into place without us having to do too much about it. You can see even the internal bars moved accordingly. Right, now that we've got that, we need to break up these bars. And I think let's start on this corner with the ligatures. Now, I'll show you a bit of a trick. If you've got ligatures like that, and you know the ears are going to be there, but you don't want the ears there, you want the ears there. The way that I normally deal with it is if I click on the bar, and I go over to the end, not the end modifier, I beg your pardon, click on the bar, and go to a splitter. I introduce a new splitter. Just make sure that I load my standards. I introduce a new splitter, and I'll hover over this edge of the column, and that will split the bar on this side. And then I'll click on the splitter, and I change my standard lapping to a custom lapping, and I make the length 0. So now what you get is you get a split ligature that just sort of crosses each other like that with 0 play. And now what we can do is if we click on that bar and we go to end detail, load our defaults to make sure we've got no silly, and then change our 90 degrees to 135 degrees, and then hover over that edge of the concrete, click on it, and keep duplicates because there's more than one modifier there. And just like that, it's now created ligatures with ears in the corner that we want. Now those have been taken care of and they look pretty good where they are. Now what we can do is we can click on these, and by the way, while we're there, because we put this in the outer layer, it's actually wrapped around the outside of those, and these have gone to a different layer. So if I click on that, visibility leg faces, that's now become layer 2, and that one has become layer 3, and these are now layer 1. So it's sort of an automated process. It's pretty powerful when it comes to rebar sets, how you can control that. But on this side, what the engineer is suggesting is he wants to end the bars with U bars with legs of 900 millimeters long. So if we click on the bar, we go to a splitter. Make sure we load our defaults just to reset anything we've changed, and we'll leave it as it is. And now if we hover over the bar, so if we hover over that other leg, the opposite side leg, as you can see, there's a value that follows us, 700, 720, and so forth. Now if I go to 900 and click, what that means is it's going to make that leg of that bar exactly 900. So if I go over this leg and I just keep on scrolling until I get 900, yep, there we go. It's now created a U-bar for us on this edge. Now, if I just go to my group mode down the bottom and I select that bar, right click inquire, you can see we've got a U shape, a double L with a 900A leg and a 900C leg and a 250B leg. So it's pretty precise modeling without actually having to work out anything. It's just drag and click. So now that we've broken that up, we also need to break up these. So I'll click on the bars, enable my splitter, go over to the opposite side until I get to 900, which is there, split that bar, and then come to this side, 900, split that. So that's taken care of that. But now there's an issue here. It's gone split all the way to the top, although we've got splitters here. Now what we can do is we can hover over this line. Let me just make sure that, so we hover over this line, then grab this arrow and just bring it down to the top of the doorway there. And then do the same with that one. Grab that arrow, bring it over to the top of the door, and now you can see that split the ends there. So it sort of that's a U, and this one continues, and the U is only there. So that sort of sorts out all of that. We need to do the same on this side. So click on the bars, enable our splitters, go 900 on this one, and on this side. Now if you see you've split something and they're still on top, what that means, it's actually a good time to talk about that. If you see, you can see a bit of duplication here. It means that you've got unequal splits. So you've got one there and one there, so that puts this bar is monolithic over that one. Now if you split it again, it sort of returns onto itself. So you need a fourth, you need an equal leg to do that. So as soon as we go splitter and we go into this leg and we click on 900, it falls back into place, as you can see there. So that sorts out all of that, and now we just need to repeat it this side, splitter, and we follow the outside again until we get 900, and then the inside 900. That sorts out that part. The outside 900, and then the inside 900, and that sorts that out. Now what the horizontals are concerned, all of that is done. Just like that, we've added all the horizontal reinforcement for that wall. And now we need to look at the vertical reinforcement. Now for the vertical, it's pretty heavy. I'm going to be looking at longitudinal reinforcement. What the engineer is asking for is asking for 24 diameter bars, and I'm going to make them a different color, like green, and I am going to delete both those values so it's auto-calculated. And the spacing, we're going to say target, and the engineer is asking for 150 millimeters, which is fairly close. So with that, we can then hover over the section and then tell Tekla we want this edge and the opposite edge that we want to do, and we can say okay, and it creates the vertical reinforcement inside that yellow bars, which is the horizontals, just like that. If we now hover over this edge, again we can pick that side and this side and say okay, it creates the verticals for us there. And then lastly, if we click over this one, we can again just pick that edge and that edge and say okay, we want bars there. Now if we look at this, we can immediately see there's an issue here, and the issue is because we put in this bars after the other bars, it's decided to arrange them inside of these main bars. But what we can do is we can click on them, enable our leg visibility, and then make sure when we come here and we click on the face, tell it you need to be in the second face. That will push that in. And if we click on this side on the face and force that into the second layer, you can now see it inserts it inside the and it's auto rearrange these to be the other way around. So you can see how well Tekla sort of manages this. You don't really have to worry too much about it to work out cover and bar positions. It just sort of happens automatically on the fly. It's pretty powerful stuff. Now on this one also we have a situation with that. You can see it's quite a distance from the outside leg. It's because again of these bars here. So again, if we just go and click on the face there and force this into the second layer, that comes out. We do the same with these bars. Click on the face, change that to a 2. That comes out. And if we just look at the top, you can see how well that's been managed by Tekla. And then lastly, well, these seem to, oh, the same story. So if we click on these, click on, yeah, instead of layer 3, that's going to be layer 2. And the same on the other end. Click on this bar, then click on the face and change 3 to 2. And then that should all be sorted out. So in this case, we've got a little bit of an issue with the bar. It still encroaches there a little bit. So what we can do is we can grab this one, we can grab this one, and we can also grab the 2 on top. And then at the moment, it's calculating start and end offset automatically of 76. So what we can do is we can just add a little bit there and force it to 90 and say 90 either way. And if we do that, that will then move those bars nicely into the ligatures, away from the verticals, and everything is good. Now, the only thing we need to do to finish off this wall is we need to extend it to lap into the wall above. But before we do that, I want to add some clips to these walls as the engineers ask for them. So this first layer, if I just click on that, it tells me that there's 48 bars. So we need about 22 clips. So if I go to the top view of this wall, I'll show you how I do clips. So this is looking at the wall from the top. Now, remember, these will be crank bars that extend into the above, but at the moment they're just straight bars because I want to use those 2 bars to draw my geometry for the clips. Now, at the moment, I'm in a level 3100, which is the top of the wall. So if I go to the 0, so I can work at the bottom. If I go to plan 0, now I'm working at the bottom, and just again make sure that I'm in my paw view and that I'm transparent. Just redraw. Yeah, I've also got to make sure that I'm looking up. Yeah, that's fine. All of this is good. So if I go Control P, we can see the, now I'm working on the ground floor down below. Now the way I do it is I draw a line, a construction line, and I use L on my keyboard, which is the same as going Edit, Construction Object, Line. I've just got an L shortcut. And then what you can do is you can draw a line from the center of one bar to the center of the other bar. Now that's drawn that bar. If you go, yeah, it's drawing it on the bottom of the bar, which is at level 0, because I added Control P in plan. And now these bars are 24 millimeter diameter. But if you go to the catalog, if you just press this ellipsis, go to the catalog, you'll see that a 24 bar has actually got an actual diameter of 29. Now, if we divide that, that will give us 14.5 millimeters. So if I go Control O, and Control O on my keyboard is the same as copy with offset, and I change this to 14.5 millimeters, and I then offset this line, you can see that that is then exactly on the edge of that. And then what I want to do is I want to put a 12 millimeter clip, that just to clip around these two, and a 12 millimeter bar's got a 14 millimeter actual, so I want to offset, Control O in my case, offset another 7 millimeters to there to give me the center of the bar I want to draw. So what I do now is if I go to Rebar and I go to More and I say Point Input, I then go and select, well, I'll zero all of this by just loading my standard defaults. And I'm going to make sure that I'm using a 12 millimeter die stirrup type bar. And I'll change the color of this to, let's keep it red. And then the target is going to be a 300 millimeters, so it is in sync with the horizontal bars. So what we can do now is we can draw a line from this edge to that edge, and then middle mouse to accept the shape of the bar. And then for the span, we can say that this bars span from there all the way to the top of the wall. Now, as soon as I do that, we get a line If I go to top view again, we get a line that looks like that. And now what we can do with this, if I just sort of flick around, and I will switch off my leg faces for a minute. If I click on this bar, what we can do now is we can add an end modifier. So if I click on the bar, let me just make sure that I select it. If I click on the bar, I can go to end modifier, load my standards just to reset, and then pick a 180 degree, and we can hover over this end. That will give us 180 degree on that side. If I click on this side, this end, yeah, I'll get another 180 degree. Now, if I just hover around, there's two issues here. The one issue is it's not quite centered, and that's something I'll address now. The second thing is there's a very small opening here, which means these guys are not going to be able to fix it. So the resolution is normally if you pick the one end modifier and you just change that hook to a 135 and you say modify, that gives them a bit more grace here to actually get the bars hooked. As a matter of fact, a lot of people on site just makes that a 90 degree hook, so the bar looks like that, and it's easily clippable on site. But for this exercise, let's just leave it 135. And then if we go back to the top and we have a good look at where those bar is, you can see what I mean about it's not in the center. So what we can do in this case, I'll click on that bar and I'll click on the vertical bar, select them both, right click, hold in my shift button and say show only selected so I can see the two. And now what I can do is I can click on this bar and say move in a linear fashion from the middle of this point to the middle of this point. Now I get a lot of values here, but all I care about is the y value. So I'm going to make sure that I zero anything that's in the x value and say move. And just like that, it moves that clip nicely onto that. So if I do a redraw, I can see that clip is nicely in here. Now if I look at these bars, there's 48 of them. So I want a clip on the every other bar because in the code it says that compression ties for vertical reinforcement that's 150 millimeter spacing or less, you only need a clip over every second bar. So what we can do with this is we can select that and then say right click copy special linear, and we can pick from this end to this end, which will give us the spacing of that current bars. And then what we can say here is we want 24 bars, so we need an additional 23. So if we then say copy, we can then see that we've then pretty much covered every second bar perfectly. But I think I'm just going to undo that quickly because the one thing I did forget is if we go to the layout, let me just get back. Yep, you go to the layout and we look where those clips are. We want this to sync with these. So we can see from the range line there that this is the start point. Now, if we give it the same start point as previously with the horizontal bars, which is 75, modify, that will just nicely slot in line with that, 75 there. And then also, if we look at the spacing, we just see what we've done with that. If I click on that, the spacing we set 10 at 300, and if we click on these and also force these to exact spacing and make them 10 at 300, just like that, all the compression ties are now 100% in sync with the horizontal bars. And now if we flick back to our plan view, we can then go again and say copy special linear, and we can pick from this point to this point. That will give us the distance, and the number of is 23 in this case. And we can say copy, clear, cancel. And if we look at that now, we now have compression ties going every second bar all the way to the end of this wall, and it actually works out quite nicely. So if we look in a 3D fashion, we can see these are what you can do with these last ones, because that's sticking out, you can click on this and on that, and then, well, they're different hooks, so we can't do that. We've got to click at one at a time. If we click on that one and say turn this one around, actually no, we can just flip that whole bar around. So if we go from the top, there's this bar. If we click on we can then say move, mirror, and we can mirror about this axis and just say mirror, and then that will just basically turn the bars around. Now the only thing you need to make sure with these clips is that your spacing is still correct, because sometimes when you mirror, it changes the direction of your arrow. In this case it didn't. So that pretty much sorts that out. So you can see the clips are perfectly in the wall now. Now all we need to do is repeat it on this end as well. So what we can do to expedite the issue is we can take that one and say copy special linear, and we can copy from the center of this main bar, and we can just go all the way across the header, get to this one, and we want the second one there, and we can say copy, and that will place it there for us in the perfect spot. And before we duplicate it, just make sure that they're still cache free. So it looks like they're all still cache free. And then I can click on this side to see the amount. It's 33 bars, so it's 32, so we need 16. So if I go here and I say I want this slip, right click, copy special linear from this bar to this bar, and we want an additional 15, and we say copy, and just like that we've replicated this side as well, so you can see all the clips are there. And let's just see how they've ended up, and they've ended up second last one, so that's also a perfect arrangement. So, and there's no clashes in this wall, and this is too short, so this is pretty much like a little column sitting there. So with that, the only thing we now need to do with this wall is to address the extension, the top. So what we can do now is we can click on this bar, and we can say we need an end detailer. And what I'll do is I'll just load the standard, and then the type of the extension I want is a cranking bar, and I'll leave everything as is for now. And then what I'll do is I'll just hover over the edge of that panel, and now you can see what's happened is it's given us, if we look at this bar, it's given us a crank, but it's got the crank down below there. So what it's done is, if you click on that end modifier, and by the way, just before we do that, if I just click on, sorry, let me just click on the bar again and hover over the end modifier. If I grab that arrow there and I just bring it back to this door opening, because that's the only place where uh, this one feeds to, is to this end. Yeah, that's it. Perfect. So what this means, if we click on this end modifier now and we look at the crank straight length, it's 1,000. What that means is we really need to push this up by at least 1,000. So if we go to the adjustment type and we pick end offset, and we type in 1,000 at the offset, and we say enter, you can see how it's now pushed that crank up by 1,000, and that pretty much aligns with the top of the wall. But what we wanted to align is to the top of the slab. So there's a 200 millimeter slab on top of this. So what we can do is we can then change the 1,200 offset to a 1,000 to a 1,200 offset. And if we do that, we can see the crank goes to the top of the crank will be exactly at the top of the slab. Okay, if we just go to a better view, let's see if we can get a 3D view here. That is the 3D view, and if we go and change this to standard, so we see the slab, you can see here what I mean by the crank then ends up being right there at the bottom of that wall. It starts in there because this crank length is 10 times bar diameter. Bar diameter is 240. It's 240 from there to there, and this gap is only 200 because this is a 200 millimeter slab. So it works out perfectly. So what we can do now is we can just do exactly the same with those bars. Add the end modifier, hover over this edge, and just like that, that's done. We've just got to make sure that it doesn't extend too far, so we can just grab that and bring that back to this end here. That takes care of those, and then we can do the same with this. Grab this one, end modifier, pretty much hover over this edge. I shouldn't have done the redraw, so let me just get back to the escape out of all of that. Let me just go back to my C4. Okay, there we go. Now we've got this, gotten rid of the slab, so we can see what we're doing again. If I click the outside ones, or the inside ones rather, click on the edge modifier, hover over that edge, that takes care of that part. And then just make sure if you hover over that it actually just covers the range. So we can just grab that arrow, bring it up to the inside of this door. That's it. And then click on the inside edge modifier over the edge there. That takes care of that. Again, just hover over that. Grab this arrow to the inside of this door, and then make sure that this area is also to the inside of this wall. So that takes care of those. actually, yeah, the end modifier didn't go too far enough, so it should be to the end of that. There we go. That's perfect. Okay, now we only need to do these. So if we click on this one, end modifier, hover over that edge, that's done. And then this one, end modifier, hover over this edge, and that's done. And now it doesn't really influence the other bars, but just for, to be absolutely sure, I'll always drag them back to where they need to be. If I click on that again, if you just hover over this end and pull this arrow back to where it's supposed to start, 410. Just want to make sure that one should also be 410. So if I grab that and I hover over this point, 410, correct. Okay, so that takes care of just about that whole wall. So what we can do now, just to replicate to the top, and before I go further, I'll just do a save, just to make sure that we've got everything saved and we don't lose anything. What we can do now with this wall being complete, sorry, I beg your pardon, we're not complete. We still need to look at the spacing of the spacing of the ligatures. Yeah, so what we can do with these, if we look at that, if I switch on my faces, um, what we can do to start out with, it looks like we're going to have a bit of a problem. I want to try and get at least one. That one would work. These ones we can move. These ones we can move. This one's going to be a problem. So this, if I go control alternate and I select all of that and I say right click, move special linear, and I want to move in a negative y axis. So in y I go minus, say, 100 millimeters, and I say move. You can see that that's pretty much cleared that first bar, so that one can start there. And now we can start arranging these. So the way I would do it is if I click on that, put off my leg visibility so I can see what's going on. Yeah, you can see that we are looking, if we click on the range line, the range line, then we go to modify spacing and we say add or remove. What we can do then is we can start dragging these so that they don't clash with the hole. So what I can do with this, I can just move this up a little bit to that end, and I can move this one a little bit this way, and this one is going to be a problem, so we click on it and we delete it. So in here I'm going to try and get 3, so I'm going to click on this one, move that one a little bit, move this one a little bit this way, and then move this one a little bit this way. So it's just this side of the hole. We've got 2 in there, we've got 3 in there. So this, we can do the same. We can move this one up a little bit, this one up a little bit. So we've got 3 in there. We can take this one and move this one this way a little bit, and we can move that one right a little bit. Okay, that pretty much does it. So now what we've got is we've got 1 on the edge there, opening 3. This one might still be a little bit close. So if we click on it again, sorry, let me just click on the bar, then click on the range line, and then edit, and then multiple. What we can do is move this one a little bit more this way, and this one a little bit more this way, just to make sure that we've got cover. Okay, that will do it. So what we end up with is 3 bars between those opening, 3 bars between those opening, 3 bars between those, 2 between those, 1 on the end, 1 on the end, and that will pretty much suffice. And that pretty much makes that absolutely clash free. So all this reinforcement here um, looks pretty good to me. I just want to make sure that in here we do have looks like we do have an issue here with cover a little bit. Okay, so what we can do with these, is, you see, yeah, we've the quickest way I think to deal with this is to move these up, to move this one up a bit more. So instead of having 75 there, let's make it 95 to put it no more. Let's go 100 mils or 105 mils. I'm guessing now just to make sure that it's clear. That's good enough. And then what we can do is we can replicate this again. So instead of actually changing this, actually we can just change this. So what we can do is if we select this, we can then paint this one, say modify, and then say paint this, this, If we then, we're supposed to shift select, see if I can change all of those. Yep, I can. So if I just go, if I then click on this one bar and say copy it, I can then go and click on this, holding my shift, click on that, click on the next bar, click on the next bar, click on the next bar, click on the next, 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 and then the last one. And if I say modify, it changes all of those spacings in one go. And that sort of sorts out all the clips now. And now it looks like we've pretty much got 100% clash-free wall. If I just scroll through it very quickly, we've got 100% clash-free wall, yeah? So what we can do now is we can go over and select, change our selection set to a rebar all. And if I select all of the reinforcement, I can then say Control C and then just copy it from this end to the top and then again to the next one and then escape. Now if we look at that, that's pretty much perfectly replicated. Everything splices very nicely and we know there's no clashes. The only thing now is because this top one here is a slab and not a wall, and maybe for that I'll actually go and look at the, where's my 3D, this is my 3D rendered view. If I go back to, oh sorry, go back to standard, you can see here this top one is on a slab. We can then just go and edit the end modifier. So if we click on the end modifier, the first thing we're going to do is load the defaults. So by default it's a hook. If we then say OK, we can see it then folds inside the wall, but we want that to be inside the slab. So what we can do with that is we can say adjustment type is a end offset, and we want, it's a 200 slab, so let's extend it 150 millimeter inside the slab. So we can see how that extends inside the slab. And then lastly, because that's going to clash with that, we can then say the hook rotation we want to flip by 180 degrees, so it flips the other way. Now that we've got that, we can also select that bar, and now that we've got that, we can click on this end modifier, say paint, and paint the opposite one and say modify, and just like that it's fixed up that one. So now what we can do is we can do the same with the others. We can click on this one, this one, this one, this, and this. So we've selected all of them, so their modifiers come up. And then what we can do is we can click on this modifier and then say paint, and then paint this, 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 and this, and I'm holding my shift key while I'm doing that, and I say modify, and it changes all of them in one go. And just like that, now we've got our wall ending up inside our roof slab with opposing cogs. So there we've got 3 lifts of lift core wall, and you know, clash free reinforcement, manually reinforced, and that was under an hour. So if I select that and I go back to our standard and I grab this paw and I say inquire, okay, it will give you the volume, so it's 11, but it's not going to give us the bending schedule at this point. What we can do is if we go back to concrete and we go back to disable our paw view, we can then click on this, and if you go to inquire cast unit part, you will see that the reinforcement is in there. Now you can see we don't have many lines, it's very optimized. And in this wall, if we do the same for this wall, then inquire cast unit, again we don't have many bars, it's very optimized. Yep, so that pretty much concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you've learned something from it. This is the whole idea with this, is to actually show you how to detail with rebar sets in a manual way, because sometimes when you get difficult walls like these, you need to manually detail it. Sometimes it's you don't always have the luxury of an API or a component. Or custom component rather, but manual detailing is just as fast. So, you know, I mean, this is probably the most difficult wall out of all of these. The others will go much quicker. So it's pretty, you know, it's irrelevant how high it is. I mean, if they start scaling down the reinforcement, then that's it's easy as click on the reinforcement and just change the details. You can then change a 24 to a 16, and then you don't have to do anything else. That's where it ends. Um, you know, so I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next video.